The ambassador's shadow, the cerulean skies of Azuria, cast everything in a perpetual twilight, painting the world in shades of blue that made Ren Takada's job more difficult. As chief security officer for Ambassador Lyra Neves, he preferred environments with fewer shadows. Shadows could hide threats, and on this alien world, those threats had multiplied in recent weeks. "You're hovering again, Officer Tokada," Ambassador Neves said without looking up from her datapad. Her voice carried the cultured accent of Earth's Brazilian territories, musical even in admonishment. "Gosh," with respect. "Ambassador, I'm supposed to hover," Ren replied, scanning the perimeter of the diplomatic compound's garden. The Azorian Revolutionary Front made 3 threats this week alone. Lyra sighed and finally looked up, her amber eyes catching what little sunlight penetrated the garden's canopy. The ARF are a small faction of extremists. The majority of Azurians want this treaty as much as Earth does. Ren nodded, but didn't relax his vigilance. At 35, he'd spent 12 years in diplomatic security. The last 3 exclusively assigned to Ambassador Neves. She was brilliant and fearless, sometimes recklessly so. Her insistence on maintaining an open approach to negotiations had earned her respect across the galaxy, but gave her security detail constant headaches. "The meeting with Chancellor Tavari is in 20 minutes, Lyra said, rising from her bench. "This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for." As they walked toward the central pavilion, Ren noticed a flutter of movement in his peripheral vision. The garden's native floor-massive fern-like plants with translucent fronds shifted unnaturally. "Ambassador," he said quietly, moving closer to her, "change of plans? We're taking the secure route." Lyra started to protest, but recognized his tone. In matters of security, even she deferred to his judgment. They diverted toward a narrow stone pathway that would lead them through a more protected corridor. They had nearly reached the entrance when the first energy blast sizzled past Ren's ear. Without hesitation, he pushed Lyra behind a massive stone planter and drew his sidearm. "Stay down," he ordered, scanning for the attackers. 3 figures emerged from the undergrowth, their faces concealed by rebreathers, necessary for Azurians in Earth-standard atmospheres. Each carried a modified pulse rifle, illegal weapons that could penetrate standard security shields. Ren fired 2 precise shots, dropping 1 attacker. The second insurgent fell back, but the third had circled around, targeting Lyra directly. Time slowed as Ren saw the weapon level at the ambassador. His body moved before his mind could process, launching forward as the attacker fired. The energy bolt caught him in the chest, just below his right shoulder, burning through his protective gear like it was fabric instead of reinforced polymer as he collapsed. Ren saw the compound security team converging, taking down the remaining attackers. Lyra knelt beside him, her face pale with shock. "You fool," she whispered, pressing her hands against his wound. "Why would you do that?" The pain was extraordinary, radiating outward from the entry point in waves of fire. Worse was the cold sensation spreading beneath it, some kind of toxin in the weapon. "Just doing my job," Ren managed through gritted teeth. Though they both knew it was more than duty that had driven him to intercept that shot. The last thing he saw, before consciousness faded, was Lyra's face, transformed by determination and something else, something he'd never seen directed at him before. Not pity, not gratitude, but a fierce, protective rage that seemed to make her glow from within. "On," she commanded. "I won't let you die for me," his darkness claimed him. Ren thought he felt a strange warmth emanating from her hands. Warmth seemed to push back against the deadly cold spreading through his veins. When Ren regained consciousness, he was enveloped in an unfamiliar violet light. His body floated inches above a strange crystalline bed, suspended by an energy field he couldn't identify. The searing pain in his chest had dulled to a persistent throb, but the cold poison still coursed through his veins, making each heartbeat an exercise in endurance. "Don't try to move," came Ambassador Neves's voice from somewhere behind him. "The containment field is the only thing keeping the toxin from reaching your heart." Ren attempted to turn his head, succeeding only in causing a spike of pain. "Where, am I?" His voice emerged as a rasp. Lyra moved into his field of vision. She had exchanged her formal diplomatic attire for a simple tunic of Azurian design, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual severe bun. My private chambers. Or more accurately, my healing sanctuary. The medical bay, he started, but she cut him off with a gesture. That cannot help you. The toxin is Azorian bioengineered venom, specifically designed to be untreatable by Earth medicine. Her fingers traced symbols in the air, adjusting the violet field surrounding him. The ARF designed it to kill human diplomats. Ren watched her movements, noticing how the light responded to her gestures, as if alive. You're not using standard medical tech. A smile ghosted across her face. Very observant, Officer Tokada. No, this isn't in your security briefing. She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. My appointment as ambassador to Azuria wasn't just diplomatic convenience. She placed her hand directly over his wound, and Ren gasped as warmth spread outward, pushing back the deadly cold. Beneath her palm, her skin began to emit the same violet glow as the energy field. My mother was Azurian, she said quietly. One of the first to emigrate to Earth after first contact. The diplomatic corps doesn't know they believe. I'm fully human with an unusual aptitude for Azurian culture and language. Ren stared at her in shock. Human-alien hybrids were rare enough to be nearly mythical. The physiological differences typically made reproduction impossible without extreme genetic intervention. Your heritage is classified information. He managed to ask. My abilities are. Lyra closed her eyes, concentrating as the violet light intensified. Azurians have natural healing capabilities, adaptation to their toxic environment. I inherited a diluted version. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to save your life. If I can purge the toxin before it reaches your heart. The warmth from her hands deepened, flowing through Ren's chest like liquid sunlight, seeking out the poison. He could feel it separating from his blood, drawn toward Lyra's touch as if magnetized. Why risk exposing your secret for me? He whispered. Her eyes opened, meeting his with unexpected intensity. Because you were willing to die for me without knowing who or what I really am? She worked in silence for several moments before adding, and because I'm tired of watching good people die for politics? As she concentrated on her healing work, Ren noticed details he'd never seen before, the faint violet undertones in her olive skin, visible only in this light, and the subtle elongation of her fingers as they worked their healing magic. For 3 years he'd guarded her, studied her habits and movements for security purposes, and never once suspected. The poison is fighting back, she murmured, brow furrowed with strain. I need to go deeper. Without warning, she placed both hands on his bare chest and closed her eyes. The connection between them intensified dramatically. Ren could suddenly feel her presence inside him, moving through his blood vessels, hunting the toxin. The sensation was overwhelming, intimate in a way that transcended the physical. Stay with me, she whispered, though whether she meant physically or mentally, he couldn't tell. Stay with me, Ren. It was the first time she had ever used his given name. Whispers in twilight for 7 nights, Lyra came to Ren's healing chamber after completing her diplomatic duties. The official story, carefully crafted and disseminated through proper channels, was that Officer Takota was recovering in a secure medical facility after heroically saving the ambassador from terrorist attack. Only Lyra's most trusted aide knew the truth, that she was personally treating him in a sealed chamber adjacent to her quarters. On the 8th night, Ren was sitting up when she entered, the crystalline bed now configured as a reclining chair. The worst of the poison had been purged, leaving behind a starburst scar on his chest that glowed faintly violet in certain light.
Oh.
You should be resting, Lyra admonished, though her tone carried no real reproach. I've been resting for a week, he replied. Any more rest, and I'll forget how to walk. She smiled, settling into a chair beside him. In these private sessions, she had abandoned the rigid formality that characterized their professional relationship. Here she was simply Lyranot, the ambassador, not his superior. The treaty negotiations resumed today, she said, pouring 2 glasses of water from a luminescent Azurian carafe. Chancellor Tavari sends his personal regards. Apparently surviving an assassination attempt has made me more popular with the moderate factions. It's nothing like nearly dying to win political points, Ren remarked dryly. Lyra laughed, a sound he'd rarely heard before their nightly conversations began. Spoken like someone who understands politics better than most diplomats. She handed him a glass, her fingers briefly brushing his. How does your chest feel today? The cold sensation is gone. He took a sip of the water, which carried the distinctive mineral flavor of Azurian springs. Though I'm starting to wonder what happens when I'm fully recovered. Lyra's expression sobered. You return to duty, and we pretend this never happened.
All of it.
Including the part where you reveal the classified genetic heritage to save my life. Ren set down his glass. Or the part where we've spent every night talking about everything except work. The ambient light in the chamber seemed to pulse slightly in response to the tension between them. Lyra stood and walked to the window, which offered a view of Azuria's 3 moons rising over the distant crystal forests. What would you have me do, Ren? She asked softly. I'm an ambassador with a secret that could end my career. You're my security officer. There are protocols. Protocols. Tested his strength, rising slowly from the chair to join her at the window. The same protocols that would have let me die rather than reveal your abilities. She didn't move away when he stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. I broke those protocols for you. That should tell you something. It tells me everything, he said. But it doesn't tell me what happens next. Lyra turned to face him, her expression vulnerable in a way he'd never seen before. The diplomatic mask had completely fallen away. I don't know. In 12 years as a diplomat, I've never not known the next step. Her hand moved unconsciously toward his chest, hovering over the healing wound. But I can't regret saving you, even if it complicates everything. Ren caught her hand, bringing it gently to rest over his heart. Then don't. The touch sparked something between them, the same connection they had shared during the healing, but without the desperate urgency of survival. Her eyes widened as the violet glow briefly illuminated where their skin connected. That's never happened before, she whispered. The healing bond isn't supposed to remain after recovery. Maybe it's not just about healing anymore, Ren suggested. His voice low, Lyra's free hand moved hesitantly to his face, tracing the line of his jaw as if memorizing its contours. This is a terrible idea, probably, he agreed, but neither of them pulled away when their lips finally met. The violet light suffused the entire chamber, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The kiss deepened, tentative exploration giving way to 3 years of unacknowledged tension finally finding release. Stay, she breathed against his lips. Not as my security officer, just ... stay, outside. The 3 moons of Azuria aligned in a rare celestial event, bathing the diplomatic compound in silver light. Inside, in a healing chamber that had become something else entirely. An ambassador and her bodyguard discovered that some protocols were made to be broken, and some bonds transcended duty. The celebration of valor 2 weeks after the assassination attempt, Ambassador Nevis announced a new diplomatic tradition, the Stellar Valor Ceremony, designed to honor acts of courage that strengthened interplanetary relations. The announcement raised eyebrows among both Earth's diplomatic corps, and Zurian officials creating new traditions wasn't typically within an ambassador's authority. Are you certain about this? Asked Mariel Chen, Lyra's deputy, as they finalized preparations in the ambassador's office. Earth Central is already asking questions about your unorthodox handling of the situation. Lyra adjusted the ceremonial sash on her formal diplomatic uniform. Let them ask. The Azurians respect ritual and public recognition. This ceremony creates cultural common ground. What she didn't say was that the ceremony also provided a legitimate reason to publicly honor Ren without raising suspicion about their growing personal connection. Since that night in the healing chamber, they had maintained strict professionalism in public while their private relationship deepened in ways neither had anticipated. Officer Tokuda's incident report has been submitted, Mariel continued, sliding a datapad across the desk. Very thorough, except for the 3-day gap in his medical treatment log. Lyra's expression remained neutral as she scanned the document. An oversight. I'll speak with him about it. She set down the pad. Is the Azorian Chancellor prepared for tonight's ceremony? Yes, though he seemed surprised by your request to incorporate their traditional Lumina ritual.
Aww.
The symbolism is appropriate light emerging from darkness, protection freely given and received. Smiled slightly. Besides, it's time humans showed more respect for Azorian customs instead of always expecting the reverse. The grand reception hall had been transformed for the evening's event. Bioluminescent, Azorian flora lined the walls, their soft glow pulsing gently in rhythm with the ambient music. Earth diplomats mingled with Azorian officials, the atmosphere more relaxed than any previous function since negotiations began. Ren stood at his usual post near the main entrance, looking fully recovered in his dress uniform. Only those who knew him well might notice he favored his right side slightly, or that his eyes tracked the ambassador's movements more intently than protocol required. Chancellor Tavari approached Lyra, his tall, slender form towering over most of the human attendees. His skin held the characteristic purple hue of northern Azurians, with subtle, bioluminescent patterns that shifted with his emotions. A remarkable gesture. Ambassador, he said, his translator rendering his complex tonal language into English. The Lumina is typically reserved for blood bonds or life debt ceremonies, which is precisely what this represents, Lyra replied, seamlessly switching to unfiltered Azurian speech, a skill that always impressed the Chancellor. Officer Tokuda shed blood to protect a bridge between our worlds. The symbolism transcends the specific tradition. Tavari's skin patterns shifted to indicate approval. You continue to understand our ways better than any human representative before you. He lowered his voice, the translator deactivating at his subtle gesture. Some among my council question if you understand us too well, Lyra Neves. They wonder about your heritage. Lyra maintained her composure, though her pulse quickened. Curiosity is natural in diplomatic relations, Chancellor, as is speculation. Indeed, his eyes, multifaceted, like those of Earth insects, regarded her knowingly. Your secret remains safe with me, whatever it may be. Tonight's ceremony has earned you considerable favor among my people. Before she could respond, the ceremonial chimes signaled the beginning of the formal proceedings. Lyra took her position at the center of the hall, where a circular platform rose slightly above the main floor. Chancellor Tavari stood opposite her, with the assembled diplomats forming a ring around them. Tonight we honor courage that transcends duty, Lyra began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. We celebrate actions that remind us why our worlds seek alliance rather than isolation. She gestured toward Ren, who approached the circle with measured steps. As he took his place beside her, the hall's lighting dimmed, leaving only the bioluminescent plants and the central ceremonial flame illuminating the space. Officer Ren Tokuda placed himself between danger and peace, she continued, willingly accepting a wound meant to sever our growing alliance. Chancellor Tavari raised his long, elegant hands, activating the Lumina ritual. Tiny points of light emerged from his fingertips, drifting through the air like sentient sparks. In Azurian tradition, he explained to the assembled humans, the Lumina represents the essence of one being freely offered to sustain another, a binding of life forces that cannot be broken. As the Chancellor spoke, Lyra extended her hand toward the flame, then to Ren's chest, precisely where the healed wound lay beneath his uniform. The ritual gesture, practiced for hours in private, concealed the faint violet glow that emanated from her fingertips. By Azurian custom and Earth recognition, she proclaimed, I name this day the Stellar Valor Ceremony, to be observed annually in remembrance of acts that preserve our shared future. The floating lights from the Chancellor's ritual suddenly converged around Lyra and Ren, swirling in an intricate dance that drew gasps from the observers. Such a response was unusual. Typically, the lights dispersed evenly among all participants. Chancellor Tavari's patterns flickered with surprise, but he smoothly incorporated the unexpected development into the ceremony. The Lumina recognizes truth beyond diplomatic words, he announced. It sees the bond already forged through sacrifice. When the lights finally settled, forming a brief constellation around Ren and Lyra before fading, a murmur ran through the crowd. Earth diplomats exchanged confused glances, while the Azurians' patterns shifted in patterns of recognition and respect. What just happened? Ren whispered as the formal portion of the ceremony concluded and music resumed. Lyra maintained her diplomatic smile, though her eyes betrayed concern. The Chancellor knows, or at least suspects, and now others will question as well. About your heritage? About us, she corrected softly. The Lumina doesn't respond to political alliances. Ren. It recognizes personal bonds, emotional connections. Across the room, Marielle was already fielding questions from the Earth delegation, her expression professional but troubled. The senior diplomat from Earth Central watched Lyra with newly appraising eyes. Ambassador, he called, approaching with measured steps. A word about this unexpected tradition you've established. As Lyra turned to address the diplomat, Ren resumed his security position, though the weight of the moment remained between them. The ceremony had accomplished its diplomatic purpose, strengthening human-Azurian relations in ways measurable by treaty progress, but it had also exposed vulnerabilities in security, in protocol, and in the carefully maintained boundaries between an ambassador and her protector. Boundaries that, in private chambers lit by moonlight, had already been irreversibly crossed. Beyond duty, the fallout from the Stellar Valor ceremony came swiftly. 3 days later, Lyra stood before a secure communication terminal in her office, facing the stern countenance of Director Elaine Hasegawa. Earth's Diplomatic Security Administrator, Ambassador Nevis, your service record has been exemplary until now, the director said without preamble, which is why I find myself baffled by your recent decisions. Lyra clasped her hands behind her back. The ceremony has accelerated treaty negotiations significantly, Director. Chancellor Tavari has agreed to 3 provisions that were previously at an impasse. Your diplomatic achievements aren't in question. Hasegawa's expression remained unyielding. It's your judgment regarding Officer Takota that concerns me. The medical logs show inconsistencies. Your security chief disappears for 3 days following an assassination attempt, then reappears, fully recovered despite exposure to a toxin our own medical teams can't neutralize. Lyra had anticipated this line of questioning. Azurian medical intervention was necessary given the nature of the toxin. The treatment was experimental and required confidentiality. And your personal involvement in his recovery? The unusual nature of the ceremony. The reactions noted by multiple witnesses. Hasegawa leaned closer to the screen. Ambassador, I've served the diplomatic corps for 30 years. I recognize the signs of compromised objectivity. The accusation hung in the air between them. Lyra considered her options carefully before responding. My objectivity toward the mission remains uncompromised, she said evenly. My methods may be unorthodox, but the results speak for themselves. Nevertheless, Officer Takota will be reassigned effective immediately. His replacement arrives tomorrow. The directive hit Lyra like a physical blow, though she maintained her composure. With respect, Director, removing my security chief in the midst of ongoing threats could undermine our position with the Azurians. They respect consistency and personal loyalty. Those are diplomatic concerns for you to manage, Ambassador. Security protocols are non-negotiable. Hasegawa's expression softened marginally. This isn't punitive, Lyra. It's protective for the mission and for you both. After the communication ended, Lyra remained at her desk, staring at the darkened screen. The rational part of her understood the director's decision. In her position, she might have made the same call. But rationality had little to do with the hollow feeling spreading through her chest. A soft knock at the door preceded Ren's entry. One look at her expression told him everything. Earth Central, he asked quietly. You're being reassigned. Tomorrow. She stood, moving to the window that overlooked the crystalline spires of the Azurian capital. I should have anticipated this. Ren closed the distance between them, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth without touching. We both knew the risks, did we? She turned to face him. 3 weeks ago, I was Ambassador Neves, and you were Officer Takoda. The boundaries were clear. Now they're not, he finished. And that terrifies the bureaucracy. A bitter laugh escaped her. It terrifies me too. She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips, allowing herself this small intimacy, even in her official space. I've spent my life hiding parts of myself to serve a greater purpose. My heritage, my abilities, my personal desires, all secondary to the mission. And now, before she could answer, her communication terminal chimed with an urgent alert. Chancellor Tavari's personal signal? The Azorian leader's image appeared, his skin patterns pulsing in the distinctive rhythm that indicated distress. Ambassador, we have a situation. The revolutionary faction has breached the Central Ministry. They're demanding the treaty negotiations be terminated permanently. Hostages? Lyra asked, immediately shifting to crisis management mode. Several, including 3 of your Earth observers. The Chancellor's patterns shifted. They're also demanding your presence specifically. They claim the Stellar Valor ceremony was a deception designed to manipulate Azurian sentiment. Ren stepped forward. It's a trap. They failed to assassinate you once. They won't miss again, agreed, the Chancellor said. Which is why I must advise against your involvement. Ambassador, however. His patterns shifted to a frequency Lyra recognized as indicating private communication. The Lumina revealed truths during the ceremony. Truths about your connection to our world that might be. Leveraged in this situation, Lyra exchanged a glance with Ren. The Chancellor was offering her an opening too. Acknowledge her heritage and, potentially, use her abilities more openly. I'll come, she said firmly. But on my terms, with my security chief. After the communication ended, Ren gripped her shoulders. This is exactly what Director Hasagawa feared: compromised judgment. You can't risk yourself like this. I'm not, Lyra replied. I'm making a calculated diplomatic decision, and possibly a personal one as well. The journey to the Central Ministry was tense with unspoken possibilities. If Lyra openly used her Azorian abilities to help resolve the crisis, her secret would be exposed. Her career as she knew it would end. Yet the alternative, maintaining her cover while people died, was unthinkable. Whatever you decide, Ren said, as their transport approached the Ministry complex. I'm with you. She turned to him, suddenly certain. If we survive this, I won't let them separate us. Technically, I'll be reassigned after this mission regardless, and maybe it's time for a new mission. She squeezed his hand. One where I'm not an ambassador, and you're not a security officer. The crisis unfolded in a blur of negotiations, threats, and ultimately, violence when the revolutionary leader refused all compromise. When an Azurian extremist aimed a weapon at a human hostage, Lyra instinctively revealed her hybrid nature, using her abilities to create a protective field. The revolutionary's weapon discharged, but the energy was absorbed by the violet shield that emanated from Lyra's outstretched hands. The room fell silent in shock earth, personnel and Azurian revolutionaries alike, frozen by the revelation. In that moment of stunned inaction, Ren moved with precision, disarming the lead revolutionary, while Chancellor Tavaria's security forces secured the others. As the crisis subsided and the wounded received treatment, Lyra found herself at a crossroads she had always feared, yet somehow expected. Earth officials stared at her with a mixture of confusion and betrayal, while the Azurians regarded her with new understanding. Your mother was Savara Tin, wasn't she? Chancellor Tavari asked quietly, using her mother's Azurian name. The healer who disappeared during the first contact mission. Lyra nodded, too exhausted for denials. She fell in love with my father and chose Earth, knowing she could never return. And now her daughter stands between our worlds, belonging fully to neither. The Chancellor's patterns shifted to a rare configuration, indicating profound respect. Perhaps that is exactly what both our peoples need. 3 months later, a new diplomatic tradition was established, Joint Human-Azurian, missions led by specialized mediators with training in both cultures. The first such mission was headed not by Ambassador Neves, who had resigned her position after the incident, but by special envoy Lyra Tyneves. Officially acknowledged as the first recognized human-Azurian hybrid in diplomatic service, her personal security was no longer managed by Earth's Diplomatic Security Division, but by an independent contractor with extensive experience in cross-cultural protection protocols, a former officer named Ren Takota. Special Envoy, Ren said as they prepared for their first mission to a contested border world. It doesn't have quite the same ring as Ambassador. Lyra adjusted the new insignia on her uniform, a design that incorporated elements of both Earth and Azurian diplomatic symbols. Perhaps not, but it has the advantage of being true. Truth has its merits, he agreed, reaching for her hand. As their fingers intertwined, faint violet glow pulsed between them, the visible manifestation of a connection that had begun with an arrow. Evolved through healing hands, deepened in twilight whispers. Been celebrated in public ceremony, and finally transcended the boundaries of duty altogether. Besides, Lyra added with a smile that was reserved only for him, I found that the most important titles aren't the ones that appear on official documents. Ren pulled her closer. Diplomatic protocols forgotten in the privacy of their quarters. And what title would that be exactly? Her answer was a kiss that carried all the warmth of healing magic and all the promise of worlds yet to be discovered together.